Welcome to this week's Ask Charlie. I have come into here for a little bit of peace and quiet to chat to you all. So I think it was last week's vlog, I talked a little bit about going to see my father and how it's not that easy, and if you'd like me to talk more about it, I would. And I have talked about it a little bit in the past, but obviously, and I'm going back probably a couple of years since I've last talked about it here with you guys. And I don't think I went into that much detail then. Anyhow, I have had a number of people that have reached out, got in touch and said, Charlie, will you talk to us a little bit more about it? Because you sharing stuff has, other stuff has helped us in the past, and this, may help others, and can you talk about it? So here I am talking about it. And I'm just going to start with this little snippet because it might help. So when I was 16, probably at the lowest, well, certainly at the lowest point ever in my life to that point, and it was pretty horrific, I said to myself, you're only going through this absolute nightmare so that one day you can help other people. And here I am now sharing stuff with you guys, and I hope that it does help me talking about these things, because I know if I had heard somebody else talking about it when I was going through it, it actually would have offered me a lot of comfort and a lot of support, because I felt very alone, very scared, and actually like a bit of a freak, to be perfectly honest. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about my past and my story. So yes, let's go. It's difficult for me to know where to start, and I might be a little bit all over the place and a bit bitty, so forgive me for that, but I'm just going to sort of talk to you like I was chatting to a friend. So my parents met up in Scotland. My mum was told by her doctor to take the Scottish air. She actually had glandular fever and she was sent up there, and she went up with a friend and they were staying in a hotel in Scotland, and my father was in the Air Force and he was positioned up there, and they met one evening. 5 days later, my father proposed to my mum, and then he was sent out to the Middle East for I think 6 months, and when he got back they got married. So she didn't really know the man that she was marrying at all. And I think mum didn't have the easiest childhood. Her father was a wonderful, kind man, but her mum was Jewish, pretty controlling, had told her that she could not go to university, she had to get a job. And so I think she was looking for any opportunity to, spread her wings. And this seemed like a great opportunity. So she jumped at the chance to marry my father. And I think in the early days they were very happy, from what I know, and for talking to, I'm still in touch with Auntie Margaret, who met my parents about 3 months after they got married, and has been a huge part of their life and mine and my brother's, and actually our family as well. So, talking to her particularly, they were very happy. And my father is a very kind and thoughtful man, but he's also super bright, his brain is phenomenal, and he is definitely on the spectrum. Where on the spectrum, we're not quite sure, but he's very different, let's put it like that. And I think it all started in the 70s, I'm pretty sure it's the 70s, where he flew, it could have been even earlier. He flew search and rescue off the coast of Cornwall over the Torrey Canyon disaster. The Torrey Canyon was a big container that had a huge oil spill. I won't go into the specifics, but that was basically it. And he saw the effects that had, the Torrey Canyon oil disaster, on the environment, and that sowed a seed in his brain, and he then became a passionate environmentalist. Not immediately, but latterly. He left the Air Force and started working in London for a company selling private jets. And then actually him and my mum set up my father's business, their business, selling private jets. And Dad was the technocrat, is actually, you know, his words, and Mum was the business brains behind him. Mum had the people skills and Dad had the kind of the knowledge and the expertise. And they had a great business. But then Dad really started focusing on the environment and the effects that, you know, flying all over the world, these engines, you know, could be more environmentally friendly. And he tried to re-engine all of the Boeing planes. And he got pretty close to it happening. But I think because of his lack of people skills, you know, Boeing, Rolls-Royce, just, yeah, doors started to close. And I think he then got angry, frustrated. He knew that he was right. They knew that he was onto something, but they actually couldn't handle him. And when he isn't listened to, and when people aren't understanding him, he starts to shout and gets, you know, actually quite angry and frustrated. And this progressed, and we had a number of years, I suppose, from the mid-80s up until, well, I'll get to that later on, in fact to today, where he got really quite angry, misunderstood, frustrated. His people skills are extraordinary. You know, he will only talk about the things that he is really interested in, and he will bore anybody, from the postman to the milkman to a child, anybody that he thinks he can talk to about whatever project it is. And one of his projects was an engine that he designed, environmentally friendly. The whole thing was called Leopard. It stood for Low Emission, Opposed Pistons, Advanced Reciprocating Developments. And I knew everything about it because he would bore us stupid. Car journeys were the worst. He would just talk non-stop to anybody. And Mum was a really social, outgoing person. She loved entertaining, she loved dinner parties, she loved socialising, but actually people didn't love coming to our house to socialise because my dad would just bore them stupid. And it became quite a problem, actually. And I think as Dad got increasingly more angry and frustrated, it became harder and harder to live with him. And I remember sitting on the kitchen worktop saying to Mum, you know, we don't mind if you leave. And that must have been in the early 90s. Anyway, Mum was very religious. She believed in, you know, marriages for life. She was brought up by her mother to, you know, you make your bed, you lie in it, you know, you make your decisions, you stick with it. And so, you know, Mum put up with a huge amount, and it broke her, actually, which is so sad and so heartbreaking. And I think and I say it broke her, she ended up having huge mental health problems herself because of what she went through. And of course, as a child growing up in that environment, it has a big impact on the children. Or me and my brother were hugely affected by it. But it was hard because Dad could be very kind and he could be very nice. And then he would snap, and it was scary. And Mum would do her best to shelter us from a lot of it. And I think for somebody on the outside looking in, they would think that we had this sort of perfect, wonderful childhood in a beautiful Georgian house with everything that we could want. But actually behind closed doors, it wasn't a happy home at all. Far from it. But then there were moments, like, I knew that Dad wasn't a bad person. It was just, he was angry and frustrated. But then when you get scared by a parent, it's very hard. It's a very difficult place. Anyway, one day, it was in 97, it was Easter Monday, and Dad snapped. He absolutely snapped. He went into a mega rage, and he locked Mum and I in the house. He locked my brother out of the house. He said my brother was never allowed back in, and it was utterly terrifying. And I have never stepped foot in that family home, our family home that I grew up in, since that day. Mum and my brother went to pack it up a few years later, but I never went back. And it was hard. It was more than hard. It was horrific. Anyway, we left. We escaped, I should say. Dad had raged probably for at least an hour. There was a secret, I knew where the secret keys were hidden. We had I won't go into all the details, but I saw an opportunity. I grabbed Mum's handbag, I grabbed her mobile phone, and I said, we're getting out of here, and we left. And we picked my brother up. The police had been called by a neighbour, but I don't really know what happened. It's all a bit of a blur, but anyway, the three of us drove off. We sat behind a friend's muck heap and decided what we were going to do, all pretty traumatised. Well, more than pretty traumatised, incredibly traumatised. And I said, Mummy, I know what we're going to do. We're going to call Mrs. B. And Mrs. B was an incredible lady. And we met her through the pony club, and we called her and we went to stay. And I think we stayed for about 3 months. I was away at boarding school, and my brother was supporting Mum. And it was a hugely difficult, stressful time. The divorce went on for 9 years, and it was hell, to be perfectly honest. So this all happened at the end of the Easter holidays. I then had to sit my GCSEs. I also had glandular fever before this happened, so I wasn't very well either. I managed to pass my GCSEs, God knows how, but I did. And I had to go back to that school to start my A-levels after the summer holidays. And I think the summer holidays, I can't even remember them. But I think we were at Mrs. B's for the majority of it. And anyhow, I couldn't tell Mum that I didn't want to go back to that school. It was in a town, and I wasn't very happy there. I had some lovely friends, but it wasn't the right place for me. So I started my A-levels there. I was very pleased to have boarding school to escape to, and actually felt quite sorry for my brother. He was on his gap year, and it was advised that I should have a bodyguard at school, because it was in a town and there was a lot of walking between lessons. So I had this guy, Dave, who would walk a few paces behind me, which was awful, as a 16-year-old girl trying to, actually I was just 17, trying to explain to your friends or trying to keep it a secret. It was awful. Anyway, and that was the time where I said to myself, you are going through this nightmare, so one day you can help other people. And now, in my way, I am. I'm, sitting here chatting to you guys, sharing my story. And if only I had had somebody to talk to or to listen to when I was going through that nightmare, to hold my hand and to say it's going to be okay. And I did, but I don't know, it was difficult. I had therapy, not great therapy. In fact, the therapist you know, wasn't very helpful at all. That's another story. But it was tough. It was really tough. I ended up leaving that school and I went to another school that was on a campus. I didn't have to have security and Dad didn't know where I was. And so that was a huge blessing and a fresh start. And that fresh start was amazing. So actually I started that school on a Tuesday, midweek. I think I arrived about 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and that was the best thing ever. And I will be eternally grateful to my mum for letting me do that, because I didn't think I'd get emotional talking about this, but that was honestly the most incredible place and saved me, I think. And I could be my own person, and I had a really loving, supportive house mistress who was incredible. Anyway, hang on a minute. Just composed myself and actually thought about why I'm crying, and it's tears and emotion of gratitude, because it was a lot harder for Mum and my brother. I had this wonderful school to escape to, which saved me, I think. Anyhow, I didn't really speak to Dad at all for about 3 years over that time. And it was hard because your brain does funny things to you, because he could be really kind, he could be really thoughtful, but at the same time, he's a very obsessive personality that would become completely sort of locked in and obsessed with whatever the current obsession was. And it was hard. And, you know, he was scary. I have got a family friend who will never set foot in a sailing boat because my dad traumatized him as a child sailing. And I was in that boat with that friend, sitting next to him, traumatized too. And thank goodness, through, I think, that school, through loving friends, through Mum being the best she could be for my brother and I, but she was seriously damaged, and through latterly great therapy. I didn't have great therapy when I was younger, and in my late teens and early 20s at all, but latterly. And I think I wanted to not be a victim of my past. I wanted to make change, and I knew that I could very, very easily go down the route of alcohol, drugs, anorexia, bulimia, all of those things, and I didn't want to go down that route. I did smoke, and actually I was a secret smoker for quite a few years. I'm not any longer, but I was, and that was, this might sound really bizarre, but when there was triggers, when there was something bad that was happening, when there was stressful things, I would go for a walk and I would smoke. And that's how I dealt with the stress, the trauma, what we were going through. And that was very hard for me to actually stop smoking, because it had become a crutch. And I only realised that more recently. Well, no, I haven't only realised that. I knew it was, but I hadn't realised the depth of the addiction and why I was doing it until more recently. You know, I think once you're out the other side, you can look back and you can see, you know, more clearly. But anyway, sorry, I'm fiddling with my hair because it's doing crazy things today. Anyhow, so, you know, it was a difficult childhood. It was a very, very difficult teenage years. because of what was going on, I made the wrong choices university-wise. I had my house mistress that I could talk to. I was very narrow-minded, and fashion was making clothes, designing was my release. And that is what I thought I wanted to do as a career. It wasn't the right path for me. I think because of everything going on, my A-level choices weren't right for me. My A-level results, I did pass them. They weren't good. I would have loved to have actually been a doctor or a lawyer or something else, but my grades were nowhere good enough. And with everything going on, I couldn't focus in the classroom, so that just wasn't going to happen. So I went down the fashion route, which wasn't right and didn't work out. So I think I then had a number of kind of lost years finding my way and finding my path, which wasn't easy, because I think when you're going through and recovering from a traumatic time, having something that you can focus on that's positive in your life is really helpful and really important. And because that was all a bit up in the air, it wasn't easy at all. And and I had lived with it my whole childhood as well. So there was it's difficult to explain, but there was a lot of stuff. Not a happy home at all, with my mum trying her absolute best, but in that she had become incredibly codependent on my brother and I. And so that then made that not an easy relationship with her, because she needed us because of the hell that she had gone through, and she had gone through years of it. And my father isn't a bad person, but it's difficult to put it into words with you guys, and my brother and I do talk about it from time to time. Simon has been hugely supportive, and as I've mentioned latterly, incredible therapy. And I think what was quite interesting, the day one of you reached out and said, will you talk about this, I was actually listening to an audiobook. And at the beginning of last week, somebody I follow on Instagram shared somebody's story on their stories. And I saw the name under the caption, and it was by Lucinda Gordon-Lennox. And I recognised the surname in particular. And I clicked on it, and it was talking about trauma. And Lucinda, and I've actually got it here, Lucinda has written, I've got my laptop, Lucinda has written a book called Nobody is Broken, and it is all about trauma. And I don't know if I've got about her book. Well, let me just find. I can't find a bit about the book at the moment, but I'm just going to read this to you. And this is on Lucinda's website. If we are feeling stressed, overwhelmed, disconnected, lacking confidence, anxious, depressed, low, quietly addicted, stuck, bored, not good enough, these are some of the signs that we are not aligned with our true self and therefore not living our best life. We might be doing really well, but we want to expand and grow just that much more, or just a whole lot faster. Perhaps we have an itch that there is more, or that we could be and could do more, but we just don't know how to get there. We want to live our best life. Most of what weighs us down isn't ours to carry. Various life events, along with deep conditioning that begins in utero and before, causes us to build up barriers to experience our true selves and this claims our power as an individual. Luckily, we can change this. We are on this planet with the capacity to live a wonderful life. Every single one of us. We all have the capacity to heal and grow. Our bodies and our systems are infinitely wise. We look together at where you are now and where you would like to be. Using a combination of energies, mindset and trauma work with the help of AI and EMDR, we will work to close this gap much more quickly. So that's a little bit about what Lucinda does, but it will give you an idea about her book. And I have listened to it on Audible, and it was phenomenal. And I actually think that everybody, certainly every parent or planning to be parent, should listen to this audiobook. It is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. And it's made me kind of think a lot about where I've been, where I am, where I'm going. I am feeling in a really good place, which is why I can talk to you and why I can share this, because unless yes, I've had an emotional moment, but that was more about gratitude rather than crying for my past, because through my therapist, through clinical hypnotherapy with Kate Finn, through a lot of, work that I have done on myself, I have got to this place. And I know that everybody can get to a place where life is so much better. And listening to Lucinda's book really kind of clarified that and was so helpful and made me think about a lot of things, made me understand a lot of things, made me understand why I had been that secret smoker. Because I knew why, but I didn't know why, if that makes sense. I'm going to leave Lucinda's details linked down below and her audiobook, because it is phenomenal. And it was 6 hours to listen to. I am going to order a hard copy as well, so I've got that to look back on. I urge everybody to listen to it because it's incredible. And all of us, and Lucinda talks about big T's and small T's, we all have some sort of trauma, whether it is, in your eyes, not a big thing compared to the person that's been in a war zone. Everybody's trauma is different. Everybody's trauma affects us, and we internalize things, we hide things, but they come out in different ways in our body unless we have processed them and worked through it and dealt with it. And it was fascinating that Lucinda's just appeared in my life when actually I needed to listen to that to be able to have this conversation with you in the way that I can have it with you today, if that makes sense. And Sarah sharing that story on her Instagram took me to Lucinda's Instagram, which made me see her book, Nobody's Broken. I was intrigued. I then bought it on Audible. And bizarrely, I was at school with Lucinda's brother, and I know Lucinda's sister, but I've never met Lucinda, and I didn't even know what she did. I'm out of touch with her brother and her sister. I haven't seen for a number of years. So just fascinating, really, really, really fascinating. And I hope that me talking about this and sharing it with you may help. I don't know, it might help in the future. You might know somebody going through something that you might want to share this video with. And I hope me talking about this stuff encourages you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. That 16-year-old girl was broken. She was really broken. And yes, it took a long time to get to where I am today, But it's possible. It is so possible. And you can do it a lot quicker than I have, to be honest. But, you know, I did. Meeting Simon and finding great therapists and starting our family. But also, you know, one thing that was really clear to me when I actually had Archie, it wasn't before Archie, but it was when I had him, I wanted to break the cycle. I wanted the past trauma to stop there and not be passed on to my children in the best way I possibly could. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect at all. But I wanted it to stop. You know, Mum had her stuff from her childhood and then obviously my childhood, and I didn't want that to be passed on to my children. And that is when I said to Simon, I need to address this. I need to deal with this. I need to sort this out. And I'm just going to share this with you all because you may be able to relate. I had a phone conversation with my mum. Archie was a baby. She said something that triggered me. And I was really happy. And I was going about my day with my baby and I was happy. I was in a great place. I had this conversation with my mother and my mood changed. And I felt this anger, this and I came off that phone conversation and I had anger in me. And I realised that, I saw that, and I was like, no, this has to stop right now. And I was actually pregnant with Coco. And I had a therapy twice a week throughout my pregnancy with Coco. And I had quite a difficult relationship with my mother while I was going through that process because things changed. Because she had been so codependent on me and my brother, me starting my own family was really challenging for her. And I had a lot to work through, and the dynamics shifted with me and my mum, but they needed to, and that wasn't easy, but we got there. But it took a lot of work, and so I you know, I'm sharing this as well because I think it's important. If you know what I'm talking to you about triggers something, there is help. There is so much help out there. I will leave BetterHelp linked down below. That's another great organisation. There is the Samaritans. There is, you know, I was lucky I could afford to pay for private therapy, but there are options if you can't afford to pay and aren't in that position. But honestly, it will change your life and it will enable you to be able to put the past, you know, be able to rationalise it through in your head and leave it there. That is the past. You can make positive changes. You can live a lovely, happy, fulfilled life and have processed all that stuff and deal with it. And, you know, that's particularly my work that I have done with Kate Finn to do with my dad. You know, he's still alive. Mum sadly isn't. But I've been able to address all of that, deal with the trauma, deal with all the confused emotions. And I had lunch with my dad, with my children, with my husband, and it was okay. It didn't change how I felt. Yes, I was a little bit, but it didn't change my mood at all. Whereas prior to me doing that work on myself, I would have actually been a bit of a mess. I was back in my childhood area, which again would have triggered stuff. And it triggered feelings, but not negative feelings, not bad feelings. It was just, you know, like you're driving through and like reminiscing. Not in a bad way, not in a positive way. It was just there. Hopefully that makes sense. I feel like this has been really, really rambly. But Anyway, thank you for listening, and I'm sending lots of love, and I will be back again soon with other how-to videos. Maybe we'll be back in the kitchen doing something fun like that. But anyway, I'm sending lots of love, and do feel free if you want to share in the comments or privately message me, send me an email, send me a DM, whatever. You know, do share if you would like to, and I'm sending lots of love.